Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to make Sfincione, which is a Sicilian holiday pizza. This is a wonderful recipe that I just discovered and I want to share it with all of you. Let's get started. Before we talk about the dough, let's talk about some of the most important ingredients in this recipe. We've got onions, provolone cheese, some Parmesano Regiano, and anchovies, and we're going to be talking about this later. Alright, now let's make our dough. This is my simple pizza dough recipe. You've seen me make this many times, although I did have to add a little bit more to it because I need to be covering an entire baking sheet with this. So it's the regular recipe plus a quarter more. Don't worry, everything is in the description box down below so you know how much to use. I let this go in the stand mixer for about 5 minutes. Afterwards, I kneaded it a little bit on the counter just to make it nice and smooth. And if you don't have a stand mixer, you can do this completely by hand. And don't worry, it's very easy. It just takes a little bit longer and a little bit more of a mess. After that, I just put a little bit of olive oil in the bowl, put the dough back in, make sure it's completely covered in that oil. And then I covered it with a damp towel, and I let this rise for about 2 hours. Next up is our sauce, and most recipes will tell you to use San Marzano tomatoes. I like to use peeled plum tomatoes, Italian style, mainly because they're less expensive, and I still do think they taste delicious, just as much as the San Marzanos. And as you can see, I was having a little bit of trouble with this. I thought the cup that I was using was big enough, so I switched to a bowl, and I blended this all up. You could do this by hand, but I feel like doing it with a hand mixer just makes it come out a lot smoother. Next, I'm going to use some olive oil, and the main ingredient you want to use in this sauce is onions. Lots and lots of onions. In fact, I probably could have used more onions in this. When you make this sauce, you're going to want to use 2 very large white onions. I used 2 onions, but they were a little on the small side, so I do plan on making this sauce again in the future, and next time the onions I use will be a lot bigger. Next, I'm going to add some fresh garlic. I'm just going to mix that in there, and then some dried oregano. And this is going to add some great flavor too if you cook this up a bit. And then finally, it's time for the anchovies. But don't tell anybody that they're in there. And I promise you, they're not going to be noticeable. You're not going to taste them. And this is coming from somebody who doesn't like anchovies. I do not like them, but I figured I'll try it in this sauce. This is traditional for this recipe, so I just had to suck it up and try it out. And spoiler alert, it's amazing. But anyway, I added my tomatoes, and I let this simmer on low for 1 hour just to thicken the sauce, and you want a thicker sauce. Next, I'm adding salt and pepper, and that's all you're going to need. This is a very simple recipe, but waiting that 1 hour for the sauce to thicken and all the flavors to develop is definitely worth it in the end. Okay, now look at that. Our dough is done rising. I'm going to take a 12 by 20 baking sheet that I greased with olive oil, and I'm just going to take my pizza dough and just try to spread it out as much as I can. And you can try all you want, but it's not going to go all the way to the edge. You're going to have to let this rise again. Just kidding, it's not done rising. So you need to let this rise for about half an hour. Either cover it with another baking sheet or some plastic wrap or even a damp towel. And next we're making our breadcrumb topping. I'm going to take some plain breadcrumbs, some Parmesano Regiano, dried oregano, and some olive oil, and I'm just going to mix that up. And I know what you're thinking. Breadcrumbs on a pizza. That's really weird, but if you live in Sicily, this is not weird. You're weird, and there's nothing wrong with that. Next, our dough is done rising finally. So I'm just going to spread this out. It's going to be a lot easier now. And I'm just going to take my provolone cheese, and I'm just going to put this on top. I'm going to just lay them right on top of one another until everything is covered except for the edges. And then you take your sauce and put it on top of the cheese. And I'm doing this mainly because I don't want the cheese to burn in the oven, because this is going to go into a very, very hot oven, and this pizza is going to stay in the oven a little bit longer than your traditional, like a round pizza on a pizza stone. Next, I'm going to take my breadcrumb topping, and I'm just going to sprinkle that on top, and then I'm going to take some olive oil, and I'm just going to drizzle that on top, and this is going to make your breadcrumb topping extra crispy. I'm going to preheat my oven to 550 degrees Fahrenheit. By the way, do this before you assemble your pizza, because you want the oven to go for a little while, say about half an hour before you put the pizza in there. Anyway, this is going to go into the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, and halfway through, make sure you rotate the pizza. After that, your pizza is completely done. Doesn't that look good? And then I'm going to top it with some fresh parsley, and you can top it with whatever you want. You can use basil, or you could just leave it plain, but I feel like this thing is begging for color, so I needed to have that contrast. And then I'm also taking a plastic spatula, and I'm just trying to make sure that nothing's sticking to the bottom. All's looking good. So I'm going to take my pizza cutter, and I'm going to cut myself a slice. And this smells amazing, so I'm ready to dig into this thing. Now, first reaction to trying this. It's very different. I do love that sauce, and I do like the fact that the bottom is kind of soft and the top is crispy. It's your traditional Sicilian pizza, kind of like how my grandma used to make it. I really did enjoy this. The bottom almost has the texture of a sponge, and then you got that nice soft middle. And yeah, I burned my mouth on this pizza, just letting you all know. I totally burnt the roof of my mouth. I'm trying to hide this, not very good at it. Had to grab some ice cold water and just down that. But I heard that eating this cold is pretty good too. I heard this from Chef John because he has a Sfincione video too. And yeah, it's really good when it's cold. Makes really good leftovers. I ended up taking this to work with me the next day, and I had my parents try it too, and they really enjoyed it. But you know something? I think we can do better. So one of my new favorite ways to make pizza is in a cast iron pan. What I did was I cut the dough in half and I put half of that into the pan and I let that rise for about an hour. Then I let it cook on the stove for about 3 or 4 minutes just to brown that bottom. When you see the steam coming out, you know that it's done. But be sure to check that bottom, you don't want it to burn. Next, I took it off the heat and I put it on a rack. I'm putting on my sauce and I'm going all the way to the edge. This is going to make your crust nice and crispy. Then I'm going to top it with my provolone cheese instead of mozzarella, and let me tell you something, I am growing to love provolone on pizza. And then I'm going to take my breadcrumb topping and cover the whole top of this. And by the way, I think I used a little too much. It's still delicious, but if you plan on doing this, just use a little bit less. Drizzling that with some olive oil, and that went into the oven, again at 550 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 12 minutes. And this whole thing is just one big crispy circle, and I just am so ready to try this out. Look at the bottom, look at the top. We're going to top this with some fresh basil instead of parsley because the basil is just fresh and I just want that delicious basil taste on top. And again, this is begging for color, so now that we're finally done making this, let's dig into this thing, shall we? I am super excited. All right, let's try this version. All right, I just want to say something. I didn't think I would actually say this, but I've made a lot of pizzas on this channel, or just in general. This is probably number one, or at least in the top 3. It has all the flavor that I want in a pizza. First of all, the crust is fantastic. I'm gonna get another piece to show you how good this crust is. I meant to show it on this one, but I just was craving to take a bite out of that, but here. Look at how bubbly the crust is. What's great about making this in the cast iron pan and with the breadcrumb topping is that not only is the bottom crispy, the top is crispy, but the middle is nice and soft. And then you get that amazing flavor from the oregano, the breadcrumbs themselves, the sharpness from the provolone and the Parmesan, but the sauce, I think, is what makes this. And I can honestly say it's probably one of the best red sauces I've ever made myself, because I've made red sauce many times on this channel, and I've always said like, oh, this is the best one, and this is the best one. No, this is the best one. And it's going to be hard to top this. And since this is going to be the first of 3 pizza videos that I'm making, I don't know, the other ones that I'm going to make after this have, they have a challenge ahead of them, so I could eat that all day. And also, put the basil on. It really adds a nice flavor to this. I'm having this for lunch. Alright guys, definitely try this one out. It's totally worth it. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.